What does a single word do to a woman when a man behind a county desk sets down his pen, looks up over his glasses, and tells her that the only thing her husband left her is worth exactly $0, not a small number, not a low one, zero, and that the kindest thing she can do with it is sign it over to the men with the bulldozers before it costs her a cent more? There is a particular quiet that follows a sentence like that. It is not anger. Anger would be easier. It is the sound of a life being weighed on a scale and found to hold nothing the world wants. At 56, with a little over $200 in a checking account and a folder of papers she did not fully understand, Marion Kessler sat in a metal chair in that office and learned that everything she had left had been written down, somewhere, as a teardown. Before we walk up those steps together, if stories about the people a town forgot are the kind that stay with you, take a moment to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. It matters more than you know to see how far a small story can travel. Marion had been a wife for 31 years and a widow for 19 days. Her husband, Elias, had died as he had lived, without fuss, without a crowd, folding a blanket over the arm of his chair before he lay down for what he thought would be an ordinary afternoon rest. He had been a librarian. That was the word people used at the service, said gently, as you might describe a man who had chosen a small and harmless life. A librarian, as if that one plain word explained the whole of him, and as if a man's entire life were a thing that could be summed up and set aside. What Elias had left her, it turned out, was not the house that had been rented all along, a fact she discovered only when the landlord's daughter came by with a calendar and a soft, embarrassed cough. He had left no savings anyone could find, no insurance beyond a small policy that barely covered the plot and the stone. There was a car with 190,000 miles on it, and the smell of him still in the seats, and a coat on a hook by the door that she could not yet make herself take down. And there was one thing more. The thing the county man was now sliding across the desk in a manila folder with a yellow sticker curling up off the tab. A library. Not the bright new branch out by the highway, the one with the automatic doors and the coffee machine and the meeting rooms named after donors. The other one. The old one. The Carnegie Library at the far edge of Harlow, boarded at the windows, fenced at the walk, appraised at nothing, and placed 3 months ago on the county's list of structures scheduled for demolition. Her husband had been its last keeper. And, though no one had told her until the will was read, he had also, quietly and without a word to a soul, been its owner. You understand, the county man said, not unkindly. The building's got no value on the books. The lot might. There's a developer's already put in an offer on the corner, decent money, cash, quick close. Your husband's brother's been in twice about it. Between us, that's the smart move. Take the offer, let them clear it, walk away with something instead of a bill. His brother, Marion, repeated. Gerald, Syed, he was speaking for the family. The man had the grace to look at the folder instead of at her when he said it. You'd want to talk to him. She did not want to talk to Gerald. But she took the folder, and she took the single brass key that came with it, cold and heavy and worn bright along one edge from a lifetime of a thumb. And she drove out to the edge of town to see the worthless thing she owned before she signed her name to its ending. She meant to be quick. She meant to look at it as you look at a coffin before it is closed. Once, to be sure, and then to be gone. She had already decided, somewhere on the drive, that she would call Gerald that evening and tell him to take the developer's money and be done. There was nothing in her for a fight. Grief had scraped her that thin. Then she came around the last bend where the county road gave out into gravel, and the old library stood up out of the summer morning, and she stopped the car in the middle of the road and simply looked. It was beautiful. That was the thing no one had prepared her for. The photographs in the folder had made it look like a ruin, and it was a ruin, but it was a ruin the way a great old face is a ruin, with all its dignity intact. Honey-colored limestone, warm as bread in the raking light, rose in a broad squared front with two round columns holding up a carved triangle of a roof. Wide stone steps climbed to a door taller than two men. Tall arched windows ran along the front, most of them boarded from inside with plywood gone silver at the edges. Ivy had come up over the lowest steps and laid a green hand across the stone. Small trees, no thicker than her wrist, had rooted themselves in the gutters and along the parapet, growing green and hopeful out of a building the county had marked to kill. And above the door, cut deep into the stone frieze in letters a foot high, worn but unmistakable, 3 words the morning sun filled with shadow so they seemed to speak, free to all. Marian sat in the road with the engine ticking and read those 3 words, and something in her chest that had been very still for 19 days shifted, just slightly, as a house settles in the night. She got out. The air smelled of cut grass and hot stone, and the green, weedy, growing smell of a place the wild had begun to take back. Bees worked the wildflowers that had seeded themselves along the walk chicory and Queen Anne's lace and a low riot of clover. The sky behind the building was a deep and generous blue, stacked with soft white summer clouds, and the light came down and raked across the carved stone and lit it up gold. It was the brightest, most alive-looking dead place she had ever stood in front of. She climbed the steps slowly, one hand trailing the warm stone of the balustrade. And that was when she saw the light. In one of the arched windows on the upper floor, the only one not boarded over, behind glass gone milky with dust, something glowed. A soft, steady, green-shaded glow. The color of a reading lamp. The kind that used to sit on library tables under a little brass pull chain. It was burning. In a boarded, condemned, empty building with the power supposedly cut for months. A green lamp was lit in the window and had, she would learn, been lit every single night for longer than anyone in Harlow could remember. Marian stood on the top step with the brass key in her hand and felt the fine hairs rise along her arms. She had asked him about that light exactly once, years ago, and never since. She had driven out to bring him a thermos on a cold night when he had stayed late, and she had seen the green glow in the high window and asked him, later at home, why he kept a lamp burning in a closed library when there was no one there to read by it. And Elias, who answered most questions with a shrug and a small, private smile, had set down his cup and looked at her for a long moment, and said, "So anybody out in the dark knows the door's still here." And then he had changed the subject, as he always did, and she had let him, as she always did, and 31 years had gone by and she had never asked again. She had been, she realized, standing on that step, the only person who had ever asked him at all. The key turned hard, then gave. The great door swung inward on hinges that groaned like a throat clearing after a long silence, and the cool dim breath of the building came out to meet her old paper. Cold stone, dust, floor wax gone to memory. And under it all, faint but unmistakable, the smell of him, of Elias, of the coat he wore, and the pipe he had pretended for decades he did not smoke. Inside, the light did the rest of the work. Even boarded, the building leaked morning. Blades of sun came through the gaps in the plywood and lay in bright bars across a floor of hexagonal tile, across long oak tables scarred with a century of elbows, across shelf after shelf of books left exactly where the last hand had placed them. Dust turned slow in the light. High above, a domed ceiling held the faded painting of a summer sky, so that the real sun coming through the gaps seemed to be searching for the painted one. It was not a teardown. It was a cathedral that the town had decided to forget. Marian walked the main reading room with her heart going in a way it had not gone in weeks. She trailed her fingers along the spines. She read the little hand-lettered cards Elias had slipped into the shelf ends, not the printed kind. His own careful printing, poetry, travel, for the very young, for the very old, and one, near the back, that only said, "Whatever you need." She found his desk, and his chair and the hollow his years had pressed into the leather seat of it, and she had to hold the edge of the desk and breathe for a while. And it was at the far end of the reading room, under the tallest of the arched windows, that she first noticed the shelf. It was the last shelf against the back wall, floor to ceiling, packed tight with old bound volumes of some county record or other, the dullest books in the building. But it stood a finger's width proud of the wall at one edge, out of true with every other shelf in a room where her husband had kept every single thing in its place for a lifetime. A man who alphabetized the seed catalogs. A man who could not leave a crooked picture crooked. He had left this one shelf pulled slightly out from the wall, and he had left it that way she would come to understand, on purpose and for her. She reached for it. Then she stopped and drew her hand back and told herself she would come back to it, that she had come here to close the place, not to open it. She told herself a great many sensible things, standing there in the ringing quiet with the dust going gold around her. But she did not leave. And upstairs, in the high window, unbothered by any of it, the green lamp went on burning in the daylight, patient as it had been for 40 years, waiting for the one person who had ever thought to ask it why. She stayed until the light moved off the floor, and then she drove back into town. And Gerald was waiting on the porch of the rented house with his wife Yvette and a folded set of papers of his own. Gerald was Elias's younger brother, and he had spent his whole life being the loud one so that no one would notice he was the smaller one. He sold farm equipment 2 counties over and wore his success like a coat a size too big. Yvette stood behind him with her arms folded and her mouth set in the patient, sorrowful line of a woman who has already decided she is being generous. "There she is," Gerald said, too warmly. "We've been worried about you, out there by yourself all day. You went to see it, didn't you? The old place." He said the old place as you might say the old dog, the one it was time to put down. "I went to see it," Marion said. "Then you saw. It's a wreck, Marion, it's a liability. You know a chunk of that cornice came down last winter? Somebody's kid climbs that fence, gets hurt. Guess who they come after?" "You." He tapped the papers against his palm. "I've been doing some work for you, quietly, because that's what family does. There's a man, Vance Pruitt, builds those storage unit places, the nice ones. He wants the corner lot. He'll take the whole headache off your hands and pay for the privilege. All you have to do is sign." "Elias left it to me," Marion said. "Not to the family. To me." Something flickered behind Gerald's eyes, quick and cold, before the warmth came back over it. "Well, that's Elias," he said. "Sentimental to the last. Never had a lick of sense about money, God rest him. Left you a debt and called it a gift." He softened his voice, and it was worse softened. "Let us help you, honey. You don't want to be the woman who stood in the road holding out for a broke-down building while the offer walked away. People will talk." "Let them," said Marion, and she was as surprised by the words as they were. She had not known she was going to say it until it was said. Yvette's mouth tightened another notch. "Sleep on it," Gerald said, folding the papers away, and it was not a suggestion, but a countdown. "Pruitt wants an answer by the end of the week. These things don't sit." That night, in a house that was not hers, surrounded by boxes of a life that fit under one arm, Marion did not sleep. She thought about the light in that tall, arched window. She thought about a man who kept a lamp lit for 40 years so that anyone alone in the night would know the door was still there. She thought about how many people must have seen that glow from the road and never once wondered at it, and how she had wondered exactly once and let the wondering go. She thought about how little she had known, truly known, about the quiet man she had slept beside for 31 years, and how everyone who spoke of him, Gerald, the county man, the minister, spoke of him as a small life, a harmless life, a life of no particular worth. 0, the man had said. Not low. 0, and she thought about the last shelf, standing a finger's width proud of the wall, in a room where her husband had never in his life left a single thing out of place. I know you can feel where this is going, and I promise you we are going there. But stay with me, because what Marion found behind that shelf the next morning is not the thing you are expecting. And it is the reason a whole town would soon do something it had not done in 40 years. If a story about a forgotten place and the good hidden inside it is the kind you would tell someone you love, take a second now and subscribe, because the part I have been waiting to tell you starts the moment she puts her hand on that shelf. She was there at first light. The morning came up green and gold again, bees already at the clover, the limestone warming, the carved words over the door catching the sun. She let herself in, crossed the ringing quiet of the reading room, and went straight to the back wall this time, straight to the shelf that stood out of true. It did not slide. She pulled, and it held, and she felt along the edge as she had felt along 100 stuck kitchen drawers in 31 years, and near the bottom her fingers found it a small iron lever, painted the same color as the shelf, worn bright at the tip by a thumb she knew. His thumb. The same wear as the key. She pressed it, and something inside the wall let go with a soft wooden knock, and the whole shelf swung out toward her on a hidden hinge, smooth and silent and perfectly balanced. The work of a patient man who had built it to open for exactly one person, and had trusted that she would be the one to find the catch. Behind it was a room. Not a hole. Not a hidden safe. A small, finished room, no bigger than a pantry, with a slanted ceiling that followed the roof line, and a single round window she had not been able to see from outside, filled now with morning. And it was warm, and it was clean, and it had been cared for. There was a low chair, there was a rug. There was a shelf of books with no dust on them at all, which meant someone had been in this room, tending it, recently, within days. And on a small table beneath the round window, unlit now in the strong daylight, but wired to a car battery in a wooden box beneath, its brass pull chain gleaming, sat the twin of the green shaded lamp that burned upstairs. A spare. Kept ready. So the light in the window would never, on any night, go out. There were other things in the little room, and each one undid her a little further. A shelf of children's books, the spine soft with handling, arranged not by author or subject, but, she slowly realized, by age, the smallest and simplest at the bottom where a small hand could reach, and the harder ones climbing up out of reach, a staircase of reading built into a wall. A tin of butterscotch candies, the kind an old man keeps for visitors, still half full. A folded quilt on the low chair, a jar of pencils sharpened to careful points, and on a peg, a second coat, smaller than his, a woman's coat, worn and warm hanging ready, though for whom she could not yet say. This was no hiding place. It was a room made to receive someone. It had been waiting, patient and swept and warm, for years, for a knock at a door that only the right person would ever find. Marion stood in the doorway of her husband's secret room and understood, with a slow and terrible tenderness, that she had not known him at all, and that she was about to. On the table, beside the unlit lamp, lay a book. Not a printed book. A ledger, tall and narrow, bound in dark green leather gone soft at the corners, its spine cracked with use. Across the front, in gold leaf worn nearly to nothing, someone had long ago stamped a single word, and beneath it her husband had added, in his own careful ink, a second. The stamped word was accounts. The word he had added beneath it was forgiven. She carried it to the reading room, to his desk, to his chair, and she sat down in the shape his years had worn, and she opened the ledger of a man the whole county had agreed was worth nothing at all, and she began to read. It was, at first, only what its cover promised, accounts, column after column in Elias's small upright-handed date, a name, a title, and a sum owed. Overdue fines, mostly, books kept too long. The ordinary small debts a library collects and a town forgets. She turned the pages, and the years ran backward under her thumb, and she began to see the second word the cover had promised, over and over, written beside the sums in a heavier ink. Forgiven, not a few. Almost all of them. A boy owed 60 cents on a book about ships, and beside it, in her husband's hand, forgiven. His father is out of work at the mine. Let the boy keep the ships as long as he wants them. A woman owed $1 and change on a stack of romances, and beside it, forgiven. She reads to keep from being alone. So do I. A name she half recognized, a man who ran the hardware store now. Owed on a book he had taken out the summer he was 9, and beside it, forgiven. He comes in to read where it is warm. The debt is mine, not his. A girl owed on a stack of encyclopedias she had never returned, and beside it, in a note that made Marian's throat close, forgiven. She is copying them out by hand into a notebook because her family has none at home. Let her keep them until the copying is done. Another entry, only a first name and no sum at all, just 3 words, owed nothing. Gave everything. A schoolteacher who, the note explained, had been fired for teaching the wrong children and had come here to keep teaching them for free until the day she died. Some entries were only a line. Some ran half a page, the account of a whole family carried through a bad winter on borrowed books and a warm room, and a man who never once wrote down the word charity. He wrote lives. He wrote the boy who would grow up to be the doctor 2 counties over, forgiven a fine of 4 cents when he was 7. He wrote the woman who read her way out of a marriage she should never have been in, forgiven everything, welcome always. He kept the account of a town's whole hidden life, and he balanced it, every year, in the only currency he had ever believed in. Page after page. Year after year. 40 years of a man quietly deciding that no child in Harlow would ever be turned away from a book for want of a coin, and writing down each forgiveness not as a loss but as an account he was keeping of the town's true wealth. He had balanced the ledger at the bottom of every year, not in dollars but in a single line of plain arithmetic that made her put her hand over her mouth. Books lent freely this year, he had written at the foot of 1 page. Books returned, most. Debt collected, none. Debt forgiven, all. Nobody turned away. That is the account in full, and it balances. She read until the light moved, and then she found the second book. It was under the first, in the pantry room, a plainer thing, a school composition book with a marbled cover. And it was not accounts at all. It was lessons. Down the first page a list of names grown men's names she saw, and a few women, and beside each one a date, and a small note. Rufus cannot read. Ashamed, comes Tuesdays after we close so no one sees his truck. Started with the alphabet on butcher paper. And later, 3 years on, the same name, Rufus read a whole newspaper aloud tonight, front to back, and then he cried, and then I did, and we agreed to tell no one. Another, a young mother, will not give her name, brings the baby, wants to read the labels on the medicine so she stops guessing. We work on the labels first. Grown men who had spent their lives hiding that they could not read a road sign, a ballot, a bedtime story to their own children and her husband, had kept the library open after dark, alone, with the shades drawn and the green lamp lit, and taught them, one by one, for 40 years, and written down not a single name where anyone could see it, but here, in a marble notebook, behind a shelf, in a room built to open for one person. The door groaned. Marian looked up. An old man stood in the bar of light from the doorway, hat in his hands, so old and so still he might have been part of the building. He looked at the green ledger open on the desk, and his eyes filled, and did not spill. "You found it," he said. "He always said you would. Said if it was anybody, it'd be you, because you were the only one ever asked him about the light. Who are you?" Odell, he came in slow, one hand on a shelf, then a table, then the back of a chair. Odell, I knew your husband 60 years. Longer, he taught me my letters at this desk when I was a grown man with a wife and no way to read the note she left me the morning she passed. He stopped, steadied himself, went on. I was the first one, near enough. Rufus you'll have read about. That was my brother-in-law. Half this town learned to read in this room after dark and swore to Elias they'd never say. That was the deal. He never wanted it known. Said a man learns better when he isn't being watched, and he keeps his pride, and pride's the only thing some folks have got left. Marion held the marble notebook against her like something that might blow away. Why keep it secret? Why not he could have been the town would have loved him? Odell shook his head slowly. You still don't see it, and that's all right. It took me years. He lowered himself into a chair with the care of the very old. It wasn't the reading that was the gift, though the reading changed lives. Mine among them. It was that he made it so a man could come and get lifted up without anybody knowing he'd needed lifting. He kept the light on so we'd know where to come, and he kept the shades down so nobody'd see us come, and he forgave the debts so nobody'd feel the weight. He spent 40 years making sure the thing you're holding was never found. And then he built a room to make sure it was, one day, by the one person he trusted to understand it right. The old man looked at her, and his voice went very gentle. That's you, Miss Marion. You're the one he trusted with it. He didn't leave you a broke-down building. He left you the account of who he really was, and he left it to the only soul who ever wondered. For a long time, neither of them said anything. Dust turned in the light. Somewhere above them, in a window they could not see from where they sat, the green lamp waited for the dark. There's more, Odell said at last, wiping his eyes with the flat of his thumb. There's a letter. He wrote it years back and made me promise. Said don't give it to her right off. Said let her read the books first so she'd know it was true, and then. He reached into his coat. Then give her this. He held out an envelope, soft with age, and on the front, in the hand she had known across 31 years of grocery lists and birthday cards and notes left under the sugar bowl, it said only, for Marion. When she asks the second question. The second question, Marion said. He figured the first one be why he kept the light on, Odell said. You already asked him that, years back he told me. He said the second one always comes after. He said you'd know it when you got to it. The old man stood, slow, and set his hat on his head. I'll leave you to it. But not today. He was real particular. Read the letter last, he said, after you know what they're going to try to do to the place. Then you'll understand why he left it to you and not to any of them. She did not have to wait long to learn what they were going to try to do. It was 2 mornings later, and Marion had all but moved into the reading room. She had brought a broom and a thermos and the boxes of her life, and she had begun, without quite deciding to pull the plywood off the windows one panel at a time so that the light came in fuller each day and the painted sky on the dome seemed to wake. She had swept the tile. She had oiled the hidden hinge. She had lit the green lamp herself that first night, standing on a stool at that upper window, and had felt, when it caught and glowed, something settle in her that no minister's words had settled. She was up on the stool again when she heard the trucks. 3 of them came up the gravel and stopped at the fence a county pickup, Gerald's big silver one, and behind them a low black car she did not know. Gerald got out, and Yvette, and a third man, trim and pleasant and dressed for a nicer town, who looked up at the Honeystone as a butcher looks at a hanging side of beef. That would be Vance Pruitt. And there was a fourth, a tired man from the county with a clipboard and an orange spray can, and Marion knew that can. She had seen its work on trees marked to fall. She came down and out onto the top step, broom still in her hand, and stood under the carved words while they came up the walk. Marion, Gerald spread his hands, all reason. You weren't answering the phone. We got worried. And, well, he gestured at the county man. Time's up on the demolition hold. Buildings condemned, it's on the list, the county's ready to move. Vance here is prepared to be very generous for the lot, but the structure comes down either way, so let's all be practical. Pruitt stepped forward with his hand out and a smile that had closed 1,000 deals. Mrs. Kessler, I'm sorry for your loss, truly, and I want you to know I've got real respect for the history here. That's why what I'm building's going to have a little plaque, right by the entrance. Carnegie Storage. Climate controlled. Honor the name. He said it as if it were a kindness. We'd start clearing Monday. Clearing, Marion said. The trees are into the roofline, ma'am. The cornice is failing. It's a safety matter now, out of anybody's hands. The county man would not look at her. He shook his can, and the ball inside it rattled, and he turned toward the beautiful gold facade with the orange paint ready. Don't, said Marion. Honey, Yvette began in the sorrowful, generous voice, nobody wants this. But you cannot let sentiment put you in the poorhouse. It is a building. It is stone. Elias is not in there. Elias is gone, and he left you nothing but a bill. Because, that is what he did, he never once in his life he taught half this county to read, Marion said. It stopped them. Just for a moment. Pruitt's smile held, but Gerald's flickered, and Yvette's mouth opened and shut. He what? Gerald said. After dark. For 40 years, with the shades down so no grown man would have to be ashamed. He forgave every fine a child ever owed and wrote it down as the town's true wealth. He kept that lamp burning so anybody out in the dark would know the door was still open. Her voice did not rise. It did not have to. You called him a small life. You called him no sense about money. He built something in this room your storage units will never hold, and I have it in writing, in his own hand, and I am not signing it away to put a plaque on a shed. There was a silence then, the ringing kind. The bees worked the clover along the walk, and into that silence came the sound of another vehicle on the gravel, and then another, and another. They came up the county road in a line. Odell's old sedan. First, then a hardware store van, then a school bus of all things, driven by a woman in a church dress, and a feed truck, and a nurse still in her scrubs, and a farmer, and a young man with grease on his hands, and a retired teacher with a cane. And more behind them, more than Marion could count, until the gravel lot below the steps was full, and the road was lined, and there were 40, 50, 60 people of Harlow standing in the summer morning at the foot of the library looking up. Odell came to the front, hat in his hands. Word got around, he said, to Marion, but loud enough. Somebody told somebody the developer was coming today. He did not say who. Turns out an awful lot of us learned to read in that room. Turns out most of us never told a soul, just like he asked. But he's gone now, and the deal's off as we figure it. We can say it now. He turned, slow, and faced Gerald and Pruitt and the man with the orange can. You want to knock this building down? You'll be knocking it down in front of everybody who ever got lifted up inside it. And their children. And theirs. The hardware store man stepped up. Owed him 60 cents on a book about ships when I was 9, he said. To no one, and everyone. Kept the ships my whole life. Read to my kids out of it. The nurse in scrubs, he taught my father his letters the year before he died. Dad read his own Bible at the end. Because of this room. The woman who had driven the school bus stepped down from it and stood with her hands folded. I couldn't read the permission slips for my own kids, she said plainly, to the morning. Signed them with an X and prayed. He fixed that. Tuesday nights, 2 years, and I never told my husband where I was going. Now I drive the bus, and I read every road sign on the route out loud, just because I can. A big man in a feed cap could not get his words out at first, and then he did. He taught my daddy, and my daddy taught me at the kitchen table, out of a book he borrowed from this shelf and this man told him to keep. I never met a soul who did more and asked for less. He looked at the ground. We should have said. All these years. We should have said something while he could hear it. He didn't want to hear it, Odell said gently. That was the whole point of him. One by one, in the plain flat voices of people not used to speaking up, they said it. A sentence each. A fine forgiven. A night with the shades down. A word learned at that desk. Pruitt's smile was gone now. Gerald had the look of a man who has just understood that the ground he was standing on was never his. And it was the tired county man, of all of them, who finally spoke into it. He had lowered the orange can somewhere in the middle of it. He was frowning at his clipboard, flipping pages, and when he looked up his voice had changed. There's a filing here, he said slowly, on the property. I skipped past it. It's old. He read it again to be sure. It's a preservation easement. Recorded, good Lord, recorded near 20 years ago. Reading room easement, it's called. Filed by the owner of record. He looked at Marion. By your husband. He put it on himself. It says the interior public reading room of this structure is to be preserved and kept open to the public in perpetuity, and that no demolition or conversion may occur so long as the room can be made safe. He lowered the clipboard. It can be made safe. Trees come out, cornice gets braced. It's an engineering job, not a teardown. He almost smiled. Ma'am, this building's not on the list. It never should have been. Somebody filed it years ago so that no one, not a county, not a developer, not a relative, could ever take it down over the head of whoever came to own it. He shook his head, something like wonder in it. He locked the door open. 20 years ago. So nobody could ever close it. Pruitt was already walking back to his black car. Gerald stood a moment longer, and something crossed his face that might, in a smaller and better man, have been shame, and then he too turned and went, and Yvette went after him, and the trucks backed down the gravel and were gone. And the people of Harlow did not leave. They started up the steps instead. They came in through the great door Elias had held open for 40 years, into the reading room full of morning, under the painted sky, and they walked the shelves, and they touched the desk, and some of them wept, and none of them were ashamed. And Marion stood among them holding a broom, and understood that she was not, and had never truly been, alone. That night, when the last of them had gone, she climbed the stool at the high window and lit the lamp. And then she went down to the desk. And she took out the soft old envelope Odell had given her, the one addressed in her husband's hand. For Marion. When she asks the second question, and she found that she had at last arrived at the second question. Not why did he keep the light on. She knew that now. The second question was the one that had been rising in her all week, quiet and enormous, and it was this: why me? Of everyone he had helped, everyone he had taught, everyone who had loved him without knowing him, why leave all of it to her? The wife he had kept his greatest work a secret from across 31 years of marriage? She opened the letter, and she read what a quiet man had written to her long before he knew the hour of his own leaving. Marion, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have found the room, and the books, and you know now the thing I never found the words to tell you across the table all those years. I am sorry for the secret. It was never yours I kept it from. It was mine to carry. Because a gift stops being a gift the moment the giver stands up to be thanked, and I wanted the town to stay lifted, not to stay grateful. Grateful bends a man's back. Lifted lets him stand. So I kept the shades down, and the ledger closed, and I let them all think me a small man with a small job, and no sense about money, and I did not mind, because you were at home. And you knew me, or I thought you did. But here's the truth I owe you. You did know me. Better than any of them. Do you remember the night you drove out with the thermos, and you saw the light, and later you asked me why I kept a lamp burning where there was no one to read by it? Everyone in this town has taken something out of this building. You are the only one who ever asked what I put into it. 40 years, and one person wondered about the light. That is why the room opens for you and no one else. Not because you are my wife. Because you are the one who asked. They will tell you the place is worth nothing. Let them. The taxman is not wrong. In his way, you cannot sell a thing like this, and you cannot spend it, and it will cost you to keep it. But hear me, because this is the whole of what I learned in a life the world called small. The most valuable thing a person can own is the good he has quietly done for someone who could never pay him back. It does not show on any card. It does not close on any Monday. It cannot be cleared to make room for something that stores what people do not need. It only shows up, all at once, on the day someone finally comes to knock it down, and the whole town stands up in the road. You will have seen that by now, I think. I am sorry I could not be there to see it with you. Keep the light on, Marion, if you have it in you, and keep a little back of fine unforgiven, a chair by the lamp, a door left open a crack for the one who comes with nothing. There is always one more coming in out of the dark. I have left you the account. It comes out even. Yours, and only ever yours, Elias. Marion sat in the shape his years had worn in the leather, and she held the letter against her, and she did not weep as she had feared she would. She sat very still, and the green lamp burned above her in the dark window, and she felt the 31 years turn from a loss she could carry under one arm into something with no edges at all, something that filled the whole ringing room. The boy came 3 weeks later. She had not been looking for him, but she had, without saying so even to herself, been keeping a little back. She had lit the lamp every night. She had left the great door open a crack, even after dark, the trees braced now, and the cornies safe, and the county's orange can gone home unused. And one evening near dusk, when the Swifts were turning over the parapet, a boy of 11 or 12 came up the gravel with a school library book clutched to his chest and his chin set against the world, and stopped at the bottom of the steps and would not come up. "We're open," Marion said, "from the top step. It's free. It says so, right up there in the stone. Free to all. That's the whole rule. I can't bring it back on time," the boy said, fierce and low, holding the book tighter. "I owe on it. I don't got the money, and my mom don't neither, and they said I can't take out no more till I pay, and I need." His voice cracked, and he mastered it. "I need the next one. It's a series. I need to know what happens." Marion came down the steps slowly, the way you approach a wary animal, and sat on the cool stone 2 steps above him so she was not looking down. "What's your name?" "Toby." "Toby." She held out her hand for the book, and after a long moment he gave it to her, and she looked at the little slip inside, and the fine that had shut a door on a boy who needed to know what happened next. "You know," she said, "my husband kept a book for things like this. A ledger. And there was a word he wrote in it more than any other." She took a pencil from her pocket, and on the slip, in a hand she was learning to make like his, she wrote it. She turned it so the boy could see. "Forgiven," she read aloud. "It means you don't owe anybody anything. It means come in. There's a lamp, and a chair, and the next one in the series is on the 3rd shelf, and you can stay till you know what happens." She stood and held the door. "The light stays on here, Toby, and the door isn't locked. It never really was." The boy looked up at her, and up at the 3 carved words filling with the last of the gold light, and then he climbed the steps and went in, and the reading room took him as it had taken 60 years of the frightened and the overdue and the ashamed, and made him, for as long as he needed it, unafraid. He came back the next evening, and the one after, and soon he had a chair he thought of as his own, under the green lamp where the light was best. He read fast and hungry, as a person eats who has been hungry a long time. And one night, when he had finished the last book in his series and sat looking a little lost, Marion set the marble notebook of lessons on the table between them and asked him, carefully whether there was anyone in his house who might like to learn what he had learned, quietly, where nobody could see. The boy went still. Then he said his mother signed her name with a mark and hated herself for it, and cried about it when she thought he was asleep. Marian nodded and did not make it a large thing, because a large thing would have shut the door. "Tuesdays," she said, "after we close. The shades come down. Nobody has to know." And that was how the light in the window began, very quietly, to do again the work it had been lit for 40 years on, in the hands of a woman the county had written down as owning nothing at all. That night, Marian opened the green ledger to a fresh page. The first new page in it since her husband's hand had gone still. She wrote the date. She wrote a name. Toby, and beside it, where Elias would have written the sum owed, she wrote instead the only balance the account had ever really kept. Forgiven, and then, below it, she left a line blank, and another, and the rest of the page open, because there is always one more coming in out of the dark, and she meant to be ready, and because some secrets are not meant to be finished, only carried forward and left a little open at the end for whoever comes next. Here is the thing the taxman could not see, and the developer could not buy, and the family could not sign away. A legacy is not the sum of what you manage to hold on to. It is the door you leave open behind you, and the light you leave burning in the window, for the ones still out in the cold who do not yet know that somewhere a place is kept for them. Elias Kessler owned nothing the world could weigh, and he left the richest estate in that county, and it took a widow the town had written off to open the book and read the balance aloud. So Marian stayed. She kept the reading room, and the county braced the stone. And Harlow remembered a man it had been allowed to forget, and every single night, in the tall arched window at the edge of town, a green lamp came on and burned steady over the carved words that had waited 100 years to mean exactly what they said. Free to all. The lamp lit. The door opened a crack. A seat by the light for whoever comes next. That is the whole of the account. And it comes out even. If you have made it this far into Marian's story, then something in it found something in you, and that is the whole reason we keep telling them. There is a new story here every week, a forgotten place, an overlooked life, a light someone left burning, and if that is how you would like to spend your evenings, take a moment to subscribe so the next one finds you. And tell us, down in the comments, where you are watching from tonight. We love to see how far a small light can reach. Ask yourself this before you go. If it had been you at the top of those steps, would you have driven back down the hill to sign the papers and be gone by morning, or would you have climbed up to see what the light was for? Tell us. We will keep a chair by the lamp for your answer.